Hello, everyone. I'm Ken Briley, Product Marketing Manager for AI and EX Switching here at Juniper Networks. Thank you for joining us in the second part of our AI Skeptics event, how partners, MSPs, and SIs are bringing additional value to customers with AI. Our goal in this session is to openly discuss some concerns partners and MSPs may have with using, recommending, or even deploying AI. The hope is to share a few different perspectives from partners who've implemented AI and learn more from their experience. Later, Andre Kindness from Forrester will lay out challenges partners and MSPs are facing and how AI has helped them provide their customers with greater user experience. With us today, we have Jason Gwynn, whose years of experience leading the networking practice for a Juniper partner will shed some light on how AI can help partners and MSPs. We also have Mark Thames, a business development director for partner programs here at Juniper Networks. So Mark, if we could, let's start with a bit of history. A few years ago, Juniper didn't offer a wireless solution as part of our campus portfolio. And because of that, we were actually asking partners to position our competition. Can you describe what's changed over the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. We used to have the Trapeze line of wireless a long time ago. It was a controller-based system. It was not an effective-based system. Had some benefits, had a lot of good stuff. I was a customer myself, in my past career. But what we did is instead of trying to go recreate wireless, what we did is we partnered first with Aruba. Of course, they got bought by HP Enterprise. We then partnered with Ruckus. We partnered with Aerohive and others. Of course, all of those were also acquired. But during that time is when Mist was born. And Mist was a new type of wireless using AI that was the brainchild of Sujay Hajela and Bob Friday, Bob Friday being the godfather of wireless, right? And so during that time, they understood that wireless had to fundamentally change to be effective and to be able to utilize AI to do that. And what we did is basically in 2019, Juniper acquired Mist Systems, not just for the wireless piece, that was a benefit of it, but for the platform, for the AI platform, the Mist AI cloud, which now, as you can see, we're plugging in the rest of the Juniper portfolio into like wired, SD-WAN, WAN, security, things like that. So a lot has changed since those days.
So what really differentiates the Juniper AI solution?
I think it comes down to the old saying of the earlier bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. The guys that developed Mist had the opportunity to see what other vendors were doing out in the industry. They could see the things that worked, the things that didn't work, and what could be improved upon. They knew that artificial intelligence was that next evolution in network automation and network operations. They also knew that delivering a SaaS cloud type solution, you needed to build things on microservices as well. So they married those two components together. They developed Mist, and then they built an ecosystem, wired and wireless, and now WAN assurance around those components. So rather than trying to bolt those things on the side, artificial intelligence is natively inherent to the system. It's much easier for Mist to pull out and leverage artificial intelligence to operate those different networking components.
Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
I think with the AI piece, it's really about the experience. I mean, what it comes down to is, what we call experience-based networking. It's the improved experience from the end user. It's the improved experience from the operator, the people managing the networks.
Absolutely, and that makes a ton of sense. So, given your background in business development, could you share your thoughts on why customers still need partners and MSPs, given that AI makes deploying and managing networks so easy?
Well, they don't deploy and manage themselves. We're not to that point yet. We don't have HAL, operating the mothership, right? We do have Marvis, which is our virtual network assistant, which is absolutely amazing. You ask people, do you have any virtual team members? And they're like, do you mean I have people working from home? No, people that are not humans on your team, right? But with that being said, we still need that design, architect, deploy, be able to manage. There's a lot of things like change control. People don't just want things to automatically be done sometimes. They want some checks in the back, things to be tested, some quality control, just for their own peace of mind. But there's a lot of different services that are offered by our partners that are critical to delivering the best experience. And also when you're moving to a new platform, you're moving to a new system, you really need a partner like our partners to be able to go in there and make sure that that customer has an incredible experience from the time that they log in for the first time, that everything's working, everything's up and running. And that's where our partners provide the most value when it comes to this offering.
Hey, Mark, just to add on to that, I think, when you look at MSP, managed service provider, the most important piece of that is the word service. And As an MSP, I would want to deliver the best service to my customers that I possibly could. And I want the best tools that are available to me. And I think artificial intelligence really gives me, as you mentioned, that second set of hands that allows me to deliver not just a good or acceptable level of service to my customers, but I want to exceed their expectations.
So what are the advantages of AI for those interested in expanding their business to cover managed services?
Well, if you look at what it takes to do managed services, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to, owners, principals of companies saying, wow, we have to invest so much. We got to go build a NOC. We got to go buy tools. We got to go buy hardware. We got to hire a bunch of people. The low barrier to entry to be able to create a service around the AI-driven enterprise is the lowest in the marketplace. Really, what do? You log in, right? I mean, think about that. It's a cloud-hosted managed solution. It's all kinds of things that can go wrong when you're a service provider. One of the biggest parasites on your profit is downtime, right? The faster mean time to repair means you can offer higher SLAs without having to make massive investments. You also have ways to where you're going to be able to meet your SLAs because you're going to have better uptime, right? So that way you don't have to pay penalties for downtime because you didn't make your SLAs. So by utilizing AI and utilizing these tools, you can provide a very low barrier to entry, easy way to get up and running, fastest way to deploy and manage. And on top of that, think about profitability. How much does it cost you in manpower to go out there and upgrade networks, do change control, do management, do all this kind of stuff? I mean, it's like having a system that's upgrading itself just makes you that much more efficient. So there's so many different benefits being able to do this through a managed service that you might not think of the traditional ways. At the end of the day, makes you more profitable, makes your customers happier.
Right. And Jason, from your side, do you have anything to add to that?
From like a partner perspective, right? I'm looking to deploy an environment. I can use some experience where we had a large customer, a large university customer that came to us and wanted to do a wireless refresh. And this is a fairly large campus with around 70 buildings. Ultimately, they purchased 4,000 APs. And it was up to us to get that deployed into the campus, right? Now, this did happen around COVID, so we had a slight advantage where the students weren't on campus and things. So we didn't have to work at night, thankfully. But we had a 3-man team. And to go in and deploy 4,000 APs, that's a daunting task, right? Just the design the design and implementation that we did, that's one thing. But then ensuring the system is operating properly, making sure that from a Wi-Fi perspective, all the channels and powers were set the way they need to be and to run and provide the best user experience, that's a whole other task. Because we had artificial intelligence that could take on that operations side. All I had to do was design where the APs needed to go in the buildings, have a cabling team strap them to the ceiling, and we came back 2 days later just to verify that everything was working fine. I didn't have to go back to a single building and retune anything because artificial intelligence was that second set of hands that we could rely on to take that part of the project forward for us. So where, where that project would have maybe taken a year and a half or 10 guys, we were able to knock this out with just 3 folks. So if I'm a partner, I'm looking at this thinking that, yeah, I have artificial intelligence. That's great. What does that get me? It allows me to deliver faster to my customer. It allows me to deliver more with the same amount of resources. It's going to make the people out there in the field more valuable.
All right. So Jason, could you describe what benefits you see for partners and MSPs looking to grow their business?
Absolutely. I mean, I just talked about how easy it is to deploy, but from a customer perspective, I usually look at a network as a means to an end, right? I need to have a way for my workforce to access resources in my data center, right? There's nothing really inherently good about that. It just ends up being a cost center. But what if, as an MSP, you can affect some business outcomes from your customer's network? What if I can show my customer how to leverage maybe user data from a retail perspective, pull that data off of the network, provide insight into what maybe my customers are doing, what my retail customers are doing, who's buying what, where's heavy foot traffic inside of a store, those kind of things. From a healthcare perspective, what if I can help those customers identify patients or track those devices that we all know are millions of dollar units? I want to know where all those things are at. So as an MSP, I can bring that additional value. I'm not just selling a wireless network or a wired network. I can then take it to a more valuable conversation and how I can truly help you leverage your network as a business.
Thank you so much for joining us here. Jason, Mark, really a great point to end on right there. Up next, we actually have an overview from Forrester's Andre Kindness covering how AI is impacting the market. Let's kick it off with Andre. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I appreciate the Juniper team giving me a chance to kind of share our research and talk about what we've been working on at Forrester Research. I think I like to kind of spend the next 20 minutes talking to you about some of the research as I spoke about earlier, and in the sense of how's taking a combination of artificial intelligence and data science tools going to help simplify and improve kind of the network operations. And what I mean by that is kind of service level assurance, event correlation, root cause identification, for example, even, private analytics, anomaly detection, and some of the really kind of the foundational pieces of a self-driving network. And why a lot of this, piece of it is really coming from the cloud. You're starting to see a big shift on where the tools like management monitoring tools are, and why the cloud really makes sense for a majority of them out there. Even in Europe, and I know there's some concerns around GDPR when it comes to cloud-based tools, but I can talk about some of that. And then why, you brought up earlier about wireless LAN, and even wireless LAN and WAN is the fact is that it's a meshing together, kind of this fabric of connections. That's we're not really looking at things very broken down into a particular silo, in analyzing in that area. But the reality is it's a mesh of them to really enable what needs to happen. And unlike a lot of other kind of presentations or maybe reports out there, we are going to put some and I'm going to bring up some financial analysis that will support this and, makes it important to the business itself. So if you take a look, as we kind of go into the next slide itself, I'm going to start a little bit differently than probably a lot of firms out there, or a lot of presentations when it comes to the analyst. I'm not going to show you, the market drivers or these huge uptakes in adoption around particular tools itself. As I mentioned, the business is really expecting a lot more from technology, and you're starting to see this in different areas on request on why should we invest in particular technology. So I'm going to start off more on, if we head into the next slide itself, more on the business side and really kind of dig into that area and then why, some of the financial analysis we did behind this, the technology that Juniper is offering resonates well with the business itself. If you're on the left-hand side and then you see the business, and the business very similar to, what's the customers are doing, that a business is serving a customer by using a lot of different resources and combining together. So, the realities of marketing firms or vendors, whether it be like in a retail store, stocking shelves, or the products in the retail store itself, doesn't come from the retailer. It comes from a bunch of vendors out there, and even the technology they use, the distribution, the trucks, the warehouses, all come in from a different set of resources. And you see this kind of a business perspective of different types of connections out there. And it makes them much more reactive to what the customer wants. On the right side is they're using a bunch of connections as well to a different set of resources. And we think about customers using their mobile phones, and they're not going to one set of type of resources when they make their decisions any part of their life. They're using a lot of different connections as well, and little bits of resources, information, whether it be friends on Facebook, whether it be review sites, whether it be YouTubes or Instagrams, as they make these decisions in each one of their lives themselves. And then if you go into the next slide where we talk about this kind of fabric of connections, that is mirroring. So the business is setting up that they have this ecosystem of resources, and you see this kind of fabric connections in there. The same thing is happening in the technology world itself, right? And we're shifting ourselves, and this has been happening for a while, of applications being in a central location, a data center. Now you're starting to see applications and usage of them from the cloud. And it's not just an infrastructure as a service where they get built out there, but we think about SaaS as an application or backup. And so interesting enough, if we just look at the left-hand side of the slide, is it becomes this data center and these clouds and multi-cloud and hybrid clouds where you're having multiple connections everywhere. And the idea of what we saw in the data center itself of this fabric of connections that you can do with VXLAN, EVPN, and in this type of environment starts to go out to the cloud, where now you have these bits of resources everywhere. And they even say that on the other side of it is that cloud and hybrid or multi-cloud, and those definitions are now really not just public and private cloud. And what that entails is now you're starting to see this edge come into the play, where you see data and applications being dispersed in all these areas itself. And so the fabric connections we think about in the data center now starts to, as I mentioned, starts to appear on the WAN side. And even inside the retail store or your bank or your hospital, that's happening as well. That there's all these connections in these areas, and we think about from the customer in there, or from the employee in there, or just even a sales office, to be employees in there, that it's not just about them and their device connecting out to the area itself. What you're starting to see is even IoT. And you think about Philips light bulbs. They sold them off in 2015. They're Simplify now.
That's right.
Or you think about Bosch, or you think about these other areas, HVAC systems from and control systems from like Bosch, and security cameras and Mobitex are a few of them that you think about them. The realities are the cameras and the security lights or the lights themselves, even HVAC systems within those areas, the devices are talking to each other. Very similar to what we saw in the data center, where VMs were talking to each other, right?
Yeah.
And so we see that on this other side starting to appear, where light bulbs and then heating systems and security cameras, based on the building and making these decisions of what goes on there, and the interactions of the amount of employees and the time they start and things that are going on, that we see this kind of inner traffic as well as this traffic going in and out of the site itself. And so you start to see this very meshing of types of connections out there in this world. And so the reason why I bring it up is we go into the next slide, which should be the IoT slide, and kind of the pies is the realities of, if you look at the left side where ports out there and virtual ports in this environment, historically has been very dominated by mobile phones amount of connections. And then there's a slice of the pie amount of connections by servers and printers and things like that. So we look at the overall amount of ports in the world around us. It's going to be shifting to the right side, is the realities of ports or virtual ports are going to be dominated by the IoT devices themselves. So VMs and printers and servers themselves, and that we traditionally thought is going to be a small piece of the pie compared to the 20, 30, 50, 100 billion, whatever people are talking about there. The majority of them will be these IoT devices all talking to each other. And so this is a very important aspect of why I want to bring this up, is that when we think about that in that area, is you're going to start to use and think about the fact is that all these things, all these devices, as well as the traditional technology, as we kind of go into the next slide itself, is that now you have this kind of disappearing of the idea that things are just on the wireless LAN or just the LAN, and these segments get broken down, that the reality is now you kind of create this business-wide fabric, because data and applications are going to be everywhere, whether it be on some of the IoT devices or like an edge compute server storage, or in a cloud or a SaaS or private cloud. All these are going to have not just physical, but these virtual connections all over the place. And so why I want to bring this up is the complexity is going to be blown 2 or 3, 4 or 5 magnitudes compared to what you see in a data center and creating fabrics, or even what we see in WAN today, that the realities of what we've done in the past, and dependent on very kind of manual tools, or even just tools that are just kind of dumb, is not going to suffice to where we need to go and where things are going in the world around us itself. And then as we kind of go into the next slide where you're seeing this clock, the realities are, it's not just also about, people talk about, and they come to you and they talk about one particular technology or another. The realities are, it's a lot of technologies that are going to enable this world that is responding to the digitalization that's starting to happen within these companies, or already happening within companies out there. And the realities are that it's the intermixing of all these technologies that are going to enable a lot of this responses to the customer, and the customer using technologies to make decisions in every day of their life. And so you just see this increase of speed and information using multiple technologies in this area itself, which then drives us to the idea that, if you go into the next slide, Jan, is that we start to see the realities of one thing happening is, to be able to manage this world, is you start to realize that we're going to have artificial intelligence and machine learning take up a lot of this, because making decisions on security and connections that are not going to be static, that they're always going to be readjusting depending on the types of connections need to happen and where the information needs to come from. When we think about that, the fact is that a lot of things inside that building are caustic, are not safe, that don't belong to the company, and they need to be segmented, they need to be isolated. And similar to what we saw VMs in the data center, you're going to start to see IoT device get put into VXLANs and VXLANs and managed by EVPN on the edge of the network itself. Very similar to what we saw in the data center, and these connections that come and go need to be dynamic, and you need to understand what goes on, whether it be on wired or wireless or WAN itself. And so the idea that having something on site, having this ability to recognize and make decisions and shift and spin things up and down is not going to work anymore, that you need to have management and monitoring things that typically were on site itself start to be in a cloud, to use that cloud-based compute and storage that is a lot larger than what a lot of organizations have on site. So you start to see this shift in companies, and especially networking organizations, use SaaS and use as a main foundation to supporting the networking organization and the tools coming from that area. And because when we think about that, so many things need to happen at one time, that AI and machine learning can be better leveraged, the compute and storage that's out there for many organizations. And I realize that, a lot of European customers come to me and say, well, we're worried about putting information out there because of GDPR and privacy and security. Already 43% of organizations are using, European organizations are using ERP systems. The businesses using ERP systems. They're using, and 33% of companies out there in Europe, or European-based companies, are already using financial SaaS-based systems. So if they're meeting the GDPR requirements of that SaaS base, or the SaaS based company, like, if we think about Mist, that, whether it be a processor or a broker, then you can use that as part of your collection of tools out there. And the reality is that SaaS-based systems, and especially when it comes to upgrades, much quicker. They fix bugs within the software at a much quicker rate than organizations can do on site itself. Typically, what you see is also SaaS-based systems are much more secure because they are fixing it much quicker itself, but also they find things quicker, and they have one set of really software they're updating and not requiring it to be pushed out to different customers that have on site. So not just from a security perspective, but even a cost perspective, we're seeing that instead of setting things up on site, managing and keeping them updated and making sure that it's meeting the security profiles and in having a dedicated set of servers and storage for these devices, the cost is much lower for SaaS-based systems out there. And even the reality is too that one of the biggest things is infrastructures need to be on 5 or 6 nines, always on. And because the realities are that so much of a business, whether it be healthcare or even aircraft or the airports, they're using so much technology, there's no acceptable downtime anymore. It is too costly. In the US, we had 4 airlines that had network issues. least amount in the US was $280 million to remove aircraft around and reticket people just for an hour of downtime from the network itself. It's just too costly in this area. And so we think about, from a disaster recovery, a lot of on-premise systems can't be moved to another data center or out to the cloud. And so SaaS-based systems are much more resilient to that area itself. I know I'm a little bit over time, but let me just kind of summarize that as I mentioned, a lot of the fact is that the AI/ML will be a fundamental piece to kind of software-driven network, and the fact is that where things are going, and it's really going to be from these cloud-based systems. But remember, not all of them are equal out there, and take a look at and maybe really do your homework on their ability to do it. And just because they put something in cloud doesn't make it good. I see a lot of the companies out there do a lift and shift. They have stuff that's on site and they're just putting it in cloud. 99.99% of them are not good. If you dig into the features, you dig into the capabilities, it's really a clumsy type of thing that a lot of good SaaS-based systems are actually built from the ground up. They were built in cloud and then as a brand new system, not compared to a lift and shift. I can highly recommend that a lot of the market will shift to not everything, but most monitoring management tools, especially from the networking perspective, will shift to the cloud-based systems itself. And the realities are, it's worth the investment today, because the things that are going on in the wired and wireless and the WAN side is really only a drop in the bucket to the amount of devices that will be connecting that, and it will generate traffic and need security concerns, and it will be causing issues on the network itself. And it's worth the investment today and to build that out and the expertise in that area before you'll see the deluge of IoT devices, which will wreak havoc on most business, 99% of businesses out there.